I was sitting right here in this cafe 32 years ago when I first knew I wanted to live in France. I want this to be my life.
And I was born right here in Paris, in that hospital. I left France right out of high school. I was looking for adventure. I wanted to travel the world. But after 32 years in the US, I'm right back here again.
We know a lot of people are thinking about moving to Europe because we hear it from our friends, we read it in comments, and we see news articles about it.
And you may think that because I'm French, coming home was easy. It wasn't.
So in this video, we'll tell you why we chose to move to France, why we chose to move when we did. We'll share some of our ups and downs, and we'll tell you after 3 years whether or not we have any regrets. I was born in South Florida, and that's where I spent most of my life. And it's where I met Antoine 5 years after dreaming in that cafe.
For me, I bought myself a one-way ticket to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 1989, and I got myself a job. When I met Colleen, I was already settled in America, and I had no intention of ever coming back. My life was now in America.
After 20 plus years of being together, we had a home in West Palm Beach. Our kids were getting older. We only had one of the kids living with us at that point, and my elderly parents who had been living with us had moved out. The house just started feeling way too big for just the three of us, so we sold it. And we rented another place while we were trying to figure out what was next. And that's when COVID hit. I remember sitting in meeting after meeting on my laptop thinking I could literally do this from anywhere. And that's when I remembered my dream of living in France. So I challenged Antoine to give me one good reason why we shouldn't move to France, because I really wanted to go.
Honestly, for me, I was not on board at all with moving to France. All my connections after 32 years in the US were like right here in America. My business was here, my tennis buddies, my friends, everything I knew about being an adult was in the US. I mean, the idea of being close to my family was really appealing to me, but the idea of leaving felt very vulnerable to me. But as a professional public speaker and running an online business, I could really work anywhere I wanted. So we asked our 16-year-old son if he was on board, and he was all in. So I told Colleen, let's give ourselves 1 year to prepare for the move to France, because that's a big commitment and it will give us the time to be ready. That was a pretty emotional day for me.
So Antoine was okay with moving, and I was ready to go. Like, you know that scene in When Harry Met Sally, when he says, when you know what the rest of your life is gonna look like, you want it to start right now? So I started collecting boxes. And by the end, I collected over 150 boxes to pack our stuff. I had a spot in the garage for the flattened boxes and a little place in the corner of my office where I started stacking the full ones. Any cabinets or little nooks and crannies of the house where there were things Antoine wouldn't notice, they were silently going away. I started donating things and selling things and giving things away, all the stuff I couldn't bring, like small appliances or the heavy bakeware and vases. And I think I gave over 40 different jigsaw puzzles to elder care facilities and other places, but I knew I was ready to go.
Now, that was a monster move. I mean, we have moved a couple of times, but usually across town or the next town over, but never across the pond. And this was planning a move where forgetting something was not an option. And I can tell you that loading a 40-foot container is not the same as putting your stuff in a moving truck. A lot of decisions had to be made with what we were going to take with us and what we had to leave behind. We really only had room to take about half of what we owned. The rest had to be sold or given away to charity. Pretty much all our electronics had to stay. We had to sell it. We kept our computers, and that was pretty much it. The rest wouldn't work here anyway. And I can still remember being at the dock in Miami, looking at my 40-foot container filled to the gills with all our stuff, and asking myself, what if something happens to this? What if we lose it? What if it falls overboard and falls in the ocean? What will happen? This really was a defining moment for me in our move to France. What I realized at that moment is none of the stuff I owned mattered. What mattered to me was my family.
If you're traveling to France, or if you're thinking about moving here, I suggest you check out our website, lafrenchiestravel.com. It's full of resources, information on where to stay, where to eat, what to do, all kinds of things to help you have a great experience of France. And we'll put a link in the description below. Check it out, see if it works for you. Finding a home in Paris is one of the places I got a little bit romantic. I started watching old movies like A Good Year or The French Kiss. I even binge watched Emily in Paris, and I started dreaming about a little apartment above a bistro or a boulangerie. And hey, if you're gonna dream, why not dream? Because I really wanted that terrace cafe life.
Finding a home in France was really challenging for us, and it almost derailed our plans to move here. I foolishly thought that finding a home to rent in France would be like in the US, and boy was I wrong. In the month of October, I was looking for a place to rent for the next June by the end of the school year. And I found plenty of homes that were a great fit for us, until I started calling them for more information. And the first question out of their mouth was, do you have a full-time job in a French company here in France? And the answer was no. I've been an independent for 25 years. Will that be a problem? And the answer was yes, that was a problem. See, France is a renter's market. Here, renters have a lot of protections from being evicted if they can't pay. So French property owners have very strict rules when accepting a tenant because they want to make sure that you're going to be able to pay. And since employees have a lot of protection from being fired at will, if you have a full-time job, that's kind of like the protection that they're looking for. And the problem is, as an independent, I don't have that. And I even offered to pay the full year in advance, and even that is not allowed in France. It's actually illegal. We went from being excited to wondering if we could move at all. I was super frustrated, and Colleen was getting really disappointed. Now, I was willing to rent something, but I wasn't willing to buy until I lived in France for at least a year or two. And after a month of searches, looking for places all around Paris and dealing with rejection after rejection, we finally found a landlord that was willing to accept our circumstances. That was a huge relief, and the house was amazing. The trouble is, the house was ready in January, not in June, and he needed to rent it ASAP. We talked to our sons, made a few phone calls, and then pulled the trigger, decided that we were going. So now we're moving in 5 weeks. And thank God Colleen had started a pack a month ago.
Moving day was January 7th, 2021. And looking back, I think that moving during COVID was a really big gift. I mean, the restrictions were kind of tough as it was pretty tight, but it also meant I got to experience a lot of my firsts in really small bites. See, I really thought I knew it was going to be like living in France, because we had been here so many times. And when we came, we didn't stay in the middle of town in hotels with room service or anything. We stayed in the suburbs, and we ran errands, we did gardening and grocery shopping, and we were driving and doing all the things that normal people do. But I didn't realize how much I was relying on Antoine to help me run those errands. I knew words and phrases in French, but I definitely didn't speak French. One day I came home from the grocery store so proud that I had navigated it perfectly. And when I came in to start using that Windex I bought, I was just smearing soap all over the mirrors. It was devastating. I felt so useless and so inept. And there were so many people that were just being nice to me. They were so kind. I didn't even know how to say thank you. I mean, merci just doesn't cover what I wanted to say in my appreciation. If I was back in the US, I would have baked a nice sweet treat or gone to just the right little store to buy just the right little gift because I knew where things were. I didn't know anything here. I remember the day that we took our son Charlie to school and we met with the headmaster of the school. I didn't understand anything. I was lost. And for me, that was a really tough day because back home, I was very active in the kids' school. I knew how to advocate for them. I knew how to deal with teachers and administrators and how to help them with homework and just to guide them. I didn't know how to help my son with his education. And I was thinking about all the Latino and the Haitian families that were in the school in Florida, and the people at the school there telling me, oh, they don't care about their kids' education. But that day, I was in the seat. And I promise you, I care about my son's education. I just didn't know how to do anything about it. Thankfully, the French education system is excellent, and my son wound up graduating from high school fully fluent and making lifelong friends, and he's doing great in the university here now. But I didn't know that on the day I sat down with that headmaster.
Now, moving back to France was really weird for me. My entire adult life was in the US. I bought my first home in the US. My children were born in the US. I sold a couple of homes in the US. A couple of my businesses were in the US. Everything that I had ever done as an adult was in the US. I was Frenchie to all my friends in the US. But when I arrived here back in France, I realized that I identify as an American. I had zero connections to how things were done in France anymore. And I can see in the eyes of the French people, I'm a bit weird for them. I'm a French guy, but I behave differently. I'm way too friendly, I'm way too direct, I say what I mean. I have completely lost the French formalities and manners. As an anecdote, just a few weeks after we moved here, I went to a grocery store and I saw a cheese on display, and I went to the clerk and I asked him and I says, what kind of fruit do you have in this? And I could see in his eyes that he was looking at me like, are you stupid or something? And I'm like, yeah, it's a comté fruité. I want to know what kind of fruit is there. And the guy said, there's no fruit in there. That means that it's a spring cheese. And I was like, well, why don't you call it a spring cheese then? And I could see in his eyes that he was questioning my IQ. But what's funny to me is that French people are really petrified of making a mistake. Personally, I don't care. But what I noticed is I ask a lot of stupid questions in perfect French.
As for my schooling, I think that's another way that COVID modifying everything helped me out. When we got here, they weren't having in-person classes, so I just doubled down on Duolingo. But the administrative process here, that's a whole new ball game. I think French administration makes the American DMV look like a well-oiled machine. I filed for my original one-year visa way back in the beginning, and by the time I received it, it had already been valid for 3 months, which meant that I had about 6 months on the visa before I had to start renewing it for the next year because they advised doing it well in advance. And so all of the benefits that I got to help me learn how to be French, I had to cram into a short period of time. And let me tell you, that was a lot. I had classes to teach me about the history, the economic structures, the industry, the culture, the musicians and artists, and who was responsible for building which bridges and which museums. We went through the education system, the social services, what your parental rights are, all about voting. I mean, we went through everything. And then there was the language test. And along the way, I had appointments to make sure that I knew I had an appointment. That might not have been what they called it, but I sat in line for hours in a town far away just so I could approve the paperwork had the right information. And what's the next step? Well, then you go home and you wait for an email to tell you to make another appointment to come back. But the good news is, as the French say, I am bien installé, which means I am installed in France pretty well at this point. And after 10 months of waiting to hear back from my request to extend my visa, finally got an appointment to pick up my new card. And now, I'm good for another 3 years.
After we moved to Paris, we wanted to explore Paris and everything that was around. But we were in the middle of COVID, so our only access to discovering France during that time was with YouTube videos. And I didn't care for much of what I was seeing. I wanted to show it my way.
I was never supposed to be on the YouTube channel. I mean, I know Antoine was starting something and I was happy to help him, but like behind the scenes, I didn't feel like, one of those perfect little influencer types or anything. But the idea of wandering around Paris and France and exploring with my honey bun, that's for me.
So I grabbed the camera and started to film things that matter to us, how to navigate the metro, where are the best bistros, where are the fun places to go. And most of our early video really sucked, but we didn't care. We were having a lot of fun. And it didn't take long for Colleen to say, hey, I have something to say, start filming me. And the rest is pretty much history.
People ask all the time, do you regret moving to France? And I have to say that through all of the adversity, all of the ups and downs, and all the ways that my identity changed, I would do it all over again, because we completely reinvented ourselves here. And I like who we've become.
Yeah, I agree with you, Colleen. I mean, with all the adversity, I would do it again. But I also know that this is not for everyone. I'm going to tell you what I tell all my friends that are thinking of moving here. Rent yourself a place for 6 months. Spend the winter here, learn about the French tax system, and if you're still in love with the idea, well, bienvenue en France.
If you like this video, next I would watch this one with the 25 biggest mistakes tourists keep making in Paris.